Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our live stream on enabling equitable education. We're looking at fostering well-being today. So do feel free, if you have access to post questions, do feel free to post questions. We will answer those during the session today. And we will be looking at a range of different tools within the Microsoft environment. So let's just move on there. There we go. So my name is Sam. I am a former English teacher and head of department. I now provide training and advice around the use of technology in the classroom space, particularly Microsoft technology. So I am a massive Microsoft and education nerd. And so you can see that kind of from the badges and so on. But I'm actually really passionate about how Microsoft technologies can be used within the learning environment, particularly when we're looking at from a teaching and learning perspective. So let's have a look. Moving on. So this session is being provided by Tablet Academy on behalf of Microsoft. We are a strategic consultancy kind of company, and we are a Microsoft and Education global training partner. So, we're really happy to be here today. Okay, so we're looking today at fostering well-being. So we have a number of different options around the Microsoft environment that really focus on how we can support our learners and actually our staff members as well, so our teachers and even our non-teaching staff, sort of anyone who kind of works within the education environment or studies within the education environment, different tools that they can use to help kind of develop a kind of a very positive culture around well-being. And I do want us to think about the staff and student part here. So when we're starting to think about kind of students, sort of there's lots of tools like Reflect and so on that we'll look at today, but I want us to also think about from a staff point of view, how that also might work as well. Okay, so let's think about sort of social and emotional well-being as we go along. So I think if we think about kind of for students, there's been a 2 years of significant disruption for them, and that's going to continue for some time. Sort of the ripple effects of these, I think, we'll be feeling for a very long time. And so something to kind of help students to be able to develop not only their academic progress, so we're very kind of concerned about what that disruption's meant for their academic progress and their academic well-being, but actually when we think about their social and emotional well-being, there's lots of kind of work that needs to be done around things like the fourth point there about developing friendships. Sort of I was in a school yesterday and we were talking about this exact point actually. And a couple of the teachers said, you know what, actually that's really, really true, that a lot of our students are really sort of having a difficult time with that gap in their developmental phase around social and emotional learning, and whether that be at primary school level, whether that be at secondary level, or even kind of in the FE and HE space as well. Really thinking about kind of how we can help students to recognise how they feel and what impact that has on how they approach their learning, on their behaviour, on sort of how their relationships develop with other people. Being able to understand the feelings of others, is a really key thing. So when we start to think about kind of technology and where technology sits with that, we can use tools like the Reflect app and so on, and Viva Insights as well, we'll have a look at today. There are other options as well, so looking at things like Minecraft and education, and being able to look at the sort of the way Minecraft can be used as well, we'll touch upon. So let's start with the Reflect app. So I'm just going to bring in my Teams window here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is just pop over to another class here. Okay, fantastic. So when we're starting to think about kind of creating different spaces for students to be able to reflect on their learning, what we can do is set up a bespoke space for that. So when we use Microsoft Teams, we often recommend use a channel. Okay, so you can use a channel just for check-ins. You can call it what you want to, whether you call it check-ins, whether you call it, you could call it things like the playground. You can call it whatever you want to. whatever's going to resonate with your students, but that is kind of a space that's protected. It's not related to teaching and learning necessarily, although it can be, and we'll look at that in a moment. But effectively, it's a bespoke space that we know kind of can be in place. Now, something that I've been talking with a number of schools, in fact, just this week, about is actually thinking about how regularly we do those check-ins. So, for instance, if we did that check-in every day, if they were able to jump into Microsoft Teams every day at a set time, and again, it depends on your device solution, how you'd approach that. So if you were in a situation where students had access to devices in class, then they could obviously do that sort of at the beginning of the day, perhaps in class. Or it could be that they look at, sort of doing that as a thing when they get home. Okay, so perhaps it's a home learning sort of piece. However you do it, having that regular data will help you to have conversations with students. So whether it's kind of you get them to look at it every day, and you notice that every Tuesday they're tired. Why is it that every Tuesday they're tired? Or why is it every Thursday they're angry? Or, sort of why is it they're always happy when they come in on a Wednesday? Sort of it's actually being able to kind of track their different kind of emotional patterns can be very, very powerful for us and for them. So let's look at this check-ins channel then. So I've just created that as a standard channel. Okay, so going into the add channel, creating that as a standard channel, everybody has access to. Okay, and then within that we can see this reflection. So we can set the question based on a bank of questions, and we can also then include parameters around how quickly they can fill it in, and then thinking about kind of how regularly we set that up. So let's go and have a look. So if I click on new conversation here, you've got the different message extensions in Teams here. And if we go to the ellipses, to the 3 dots, okay, or otherwise known as the breadcrumbs if you're into nicknaming things. Okay, so go into the breadcrumbs and we can click on the reflect option here. That's in my recent apps because I've used it recently. If it's not in yours, you can just type in reflect in the top there, and then that will take you to the reflections here. Okay, so then we get to see the reflect options here, where we get to choose our question. So we've got a bank of different questions that are available to us. Okay, and so what we can do is we can pick from that bank. At the moment, you can't customize those particular questions, although we'll have a look at OneNote in a moment, where you can customize some of the learning questions there. But we've got that reflection sort of bank of questions that we can draw from. So that is personal, social, learning, and goals and intentions. So if I know that actually some of my students are, perhaps there's a lot of conflict happening in my class at the moment, I can start to ask questions like, how do your friendships feel today? How do you think your classmates are feeling right now? Or if I know that I want, perhaps there's a feeling of nervousness around an assignment I've particularly kind of put out, we can then ask questions about this, or how they feel about their progress in the class, how they're feeling about what we've covered today. You can kind of pick the different question. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the week. Okay, so I'll choose how did this week feel for you. We can choose the privacy settings. So we decide whether educators can see student names or reflections. We can see, effectively, educators can see everything, whether classmates can see the summary of the reflections is there, and then you can get to see whether educators can only see the data, students don't see anything. So you can choose what the privacy level is. Okay, so I'll choose that one there so that they can actually see everybody's overall response as a class. We can decide how long that's going to be. So are we looking at giving them 5 minutes for a reflection even, a couple of hours, a day, a week? We can choose the parameters there. Okay, so I'll just choose that one as 2 hours there. Okay, and then what the students will see is this this box here. So they'll get the choice of having any of these emojis. Okay, and then what that will do is correspond to an extension where they get to pick a word that explains why they feel that way. So let's try this out. So I'm going to pick this orange one here. Okay, as a slightly unhappy. And we can see that's color coded. So we've got the kind of the lighter orange there. So we can then pick any of the words here. So perhaps I'm feeling lonely, okay, or nervous. Perhaps I'm feeling concerned or shocked. So they get these emotions monsters that allow us to not only pick the words, so thinking for your readers who might be emerging readers, they might be sort of perhaps some of the language there might be a little bit more complex for them. They've got that language, but they've also got the physical kind of piece of the emotions monster to back up kind of that feeling. So they can, if they can't recognize the word to feel to relate to how they feel, they can pick kind of the emotions monster that sits with them. So they can pick any of these ones here. So let's have a look at a different one. So let's exit the student view. So let's pick the really happy one here. We can see that's also color coded. So we've got the green there, and then the monsters are green as well. Okay, so that's really nice because it means we can see very pictorially, sort of the experience for the students. So let's pick determined there. Okay, so we get that as a sentence then. This week I felt determined. Okay, and then they would then submit that. Okay, so let's exit that student view. Cancel that one there. So let's look at one we made earlier. Okay, so I'm just going to explore this one I did yesterday. Okay. So again, remember, for me as the teacher, I get to see all of the data. The students only see, if I've given them access to the summary, the students only see the summary of the data. I can choose kind of how that sits. So then I can see which votes here. Okay, so I can see kind of people, sort of whether people are really happy, whether they are sort of quite happy, and so on, right the way across the board. And I can click into that and drill down and actually say, right, okay, Wilfred Owen's feeling optimistic. Okay, that's great. Where this comes into its own is actually we start to get the data pull back into insights. Okay, so if you've used Teams before, or you're using Teams regularly, you know that there is class insights built into Teams, and the Reflect app is a part of that. So we can click View in Insights here. That's going to take us into Insights, but we can also choose, if I click Done here, let's give that a second to load. There we go. And we click Insights on the tab there. We can see a whole range of different options for different things we want insights into, and the Reflect app is one of those. So we can start to think about how sort of the students are feeling, not just on a one-off. So that's great if I go into the data there to see kind of the immediate sense of what's happening. But if I want to see actually what's happening across the board, I can then use the insights here to be able to pick up their reflections across kind of a regular point. So I can click on the Reflect option there. Okay. And then we also have, you can see Teams and Class Notebook. We'll get to Class Notebook in a moment. Okay, but we can start to see data across the whole class. We get our top words. So if this is done regularly with students, we can see, sort of regularly how they're feeling. So that gives us both their emotional well-being in terms of kind of those first few questions around their personal kind of feelings and emotions, but we can also see that across the board from a learning point of view. What are their feelings around kind of the material that we're learning, or sort of the lessons and their assignments? We'll get the top phrases for that, so that's across the whole class there. But we can also then see an individual student. So if I pick a student from the list here, okay, I can see that student's data. Okay, and see their participation, their top words. I can drill that down by all of the questions. So in this case, we've only kind of set one reflection question here, but if I've set kind of 10 or 12 different questions, I want to focus on just, sort of the questions where I'm asking about how they feel, or the questions I'm asking about how they feel about their assignments. I've got different information and different data that I can drill down into. Okay, so we can then go into that across a time range. So we can go in the last 28 days, or we can then customize that and say the last week, the previous month, the whole academic year. If you want to, we can customize kind of what we see, and we can also turn off different emotions. So if we always want to see, actually, let's turn on the angry one there. Okay, if we always want to see kind of when sort of that particular sort of feeling is in place, we can see that. Okay, and that's either by student or by the whole class. Okay, so let's, there we go, put those back in. Okay, so this also does appear in a OneNote class notebook as well. Okay, so if I go into the class notebook here, go, just let that load up. Effectively, what I can do is tie in kind of the reflections to the learning that's happening in the class notebook. So I pick up here. Just going to expand the navigation. Okay, and perhaps I want to look at, just go into the content library here. Go. Okay, so perhaps on this page, once it loads up, I want to be able to go into the reflection. I can go into the class notebook here, and I've actually got the Reflect app is now built in to the class notebook on, just let's go, it's built into the class notebook online. Okay, so this is built into this class notebook tool in the online version. Do kind of watch for that to appear kind of across the board in other versions, but certainly if I'm using class notebook either within Teams as OneNote Online embedded in Teams, or just using it in OneNote Online generally, I will see the Reflect app appear there. Okay, so once that opens up, okay, that's going to then appear, and that will give us the chance to then think about, well, what do we want to reflect on? Do we want to reflect on, you know, sort of things like confidence, motivation, understanding, and so on? So I can say, say the level of effort. Okay. How do you feel about the level of effort you put into? You can then adapt that. Okay. So you could say, story. Okay, and then I can add a check into the page. I'll just close that down there. Okay, so one thing we just need to make sure I didn't do is actually put the cursor on the page. So let's just do that again. So we'll add a reflection in. Okay, make sure that the cursor is not on the title bar of the page. So there we go, level of effort. Okay, you've put into. Let's just delete that out. There we go. Story. And I'll add the check into the page. So now we've got the Reflect app, appears effectively embedded into the OneNote page there. Okay. And then they can click on that and then vote from within there. Okay. So just let that load up. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second, but I think the key thing to point out is that that's kind of built into the kind of the run of Teams. So when we go back into Insights, actually, when we look at Insights for the Reflect app, what we've got is the ability to see the reflections for Teams, but we've also got the ability to see those in Class Notebook as well. So all of the data is in the same place. It's all there in together for us to be able to reflect in here. Okay, so we can see kind of those reflections and then the student list, how they've participated and so on. We get the words, the response distribution, so on as well. Okay, so the key thing for us is that the students have different ways to reflect on their emotional well-being and their, you know, sort of their progress and so on, kind of moving forward. Okay, so let's think about staff for a moment. So I think, you know, sort of there's a real focus on, you know, sort of student well-being. But as staff, we've had 2 years of significant disruption too, and the teaching profession is, sort of one where we're often, sort of under quite significant pressure, but without the space to be able to talk about kind of, sort of how we're feeling about different things. So if I go into my teams here, and actually I go to a staff team, okay, so I'm just going to go into my staff team here, okay, you can then actually create a reflection based on for staff. So they'll have the same kind of anonymity, sort of so that they can't see each other's and that kind of thing. But effectively, we're giving staff a voice as well. And if we go into to add in the reflect here, the questions are actually focused on teachers and the kinds of feelings, emotions, and reflections that teachers, so would be useful for teachers. So when we click on the drop down here, we get classroom relationships, how you feel about your lesson planning, your capacity to support students. Overall, how did this week feel for you? How do you feel, how you managed your emotions? Because we're really good at teaching the students kind of how to reflect on how they're feeling and sort of being able to have those conversations with students, and sometimes kind of it's easy to lose yourself in that, and so actually having the ability to create a reflection just means that we can actually start to have conversations about sort of what things we need to look at and potentially what we might want to change, or sort of what we need support with perhaps. Okay, so there are lots of different kind of question options there. So, for instance, if I wanted to, sort of, how do you feel about the opportunities to leverage your personal strengths this week? Again, they get the same kind of idea. So let's go into that. Okay, and again, you still get the emotions monsters. Who doesn't love an emotions monster? So perhaps we're proud of our achievements, or we feel successful or valued, or if it's a sort of a slightly more, sort of a fraught week, perhaps. I know that if you're in primary education, it's SATS week coming up next week and the week after, or, sort of you're in secondary education, you've got the GCSE exams coming up. So the likelihood is, there's a chance that, you could be in a different place, or it could be that actually you're feeling stressed, okay, and under pressure. So in which case you can kind of have that as your emotions monster there. Okay, so that's giving us a different way for staff to reflect on their social emotional learning. There is also something called Viva Insights. Okay, so if I go into the three dots on the left hand side here, so I'm going into the breadcrumbs. Now this is about me adding an app to my teams. So it's not me adding an app to an individual team. This is for me personally. Okay, you'll notice there's a range of different things. There's lots of different apps that you can add. If I click on more apps, there's a whole range of different applications that will appear in a window in a moment for you that you can kind of add to your team. So, and some of them are business related, some of them are education related, and some of them are really good from a well-being. There we go. Okay, so you can pick kind of from different things. So whether it be from workflows, you get a whole range of different apps available, sort of for you. So, you can find things that suit. So if you are looking for education related apps, they're there as well, and so on. Okay. Now, if I go back into the three dots, this Viva Insights, okay, so if you haven't seen this before, just a little blue icon here. You can type in Viva into your Find an App. It should come up if it doesn't come up in your recent ones. Let's click on that. So this is not me as a head of department. This is not me as, sort of somebody talking to my colleagues. This is just for me. Okay, so it's a way for me to reflect on my learning as a teacher, my feelings as a teacher, and so on, and how I work within my space. Okay, so I can actually set personal reflections. So the Reflect app that we just looked at a moment ago is actually me, perhaps as a leader or as head department, or as sort of somebody sort of looking at emotional well-being for staff. me setting that as a task for other people to kind of engage in, which is useful because we get to see kind of a whole picture. But actually, sort of sometimes it's useful just to be able to have a sounding board and being able to kind of track our own reflections, so how we're feeling about things, and actually see that over time without necessarily having that conversation with other people. So it's private to us, can be, sort of very powerful for us to be able to reflect on how we're feeling as well. Okay. We do have the ability to do things like set up a virtual commute. So if you're using apps like Microsoft To Do, okay, it will show you kind of anything that you've got left to do, anything, sort of tasks that are still kind of around for you that you need to complete. You can protect some time, so you can book in some focus time. So for instance, if you need to do some market at a particular time, you can sort of protect time in your calendar. It's possibly less sort of flexible for teachers because we've got so many different things that are happening at different times, but you can kind of set a goal of time to be able to work that effectively puts you onto do not disturb on Teams and allows you to kind of spend some time just focusing on the thing you need to. It does kind of also give you top actions in terms of things like your email. So it's a really good way of kind of keeping organized as well, because effectively Viva Insights is tracking sort of different ways you're working in Office 365 and then giving you suggestions on things you might need to pick up, or, things you might have forgotten. It effectively kind of supports you in that way. Now, I did mention the virtual commute. So if I just go into my activity on the left-hand side here, we can see that if I just scan down a little bit, we can see this ready to wrap up. Okay. And so that's going to start my virtual commute. Okay. And if I click on Let's Go, it's going to give me reminders from my to-do tasks. Sort of I can add a task that I want to complete later. So, kind of when we're sat at the end of the day, we're like, oh my God, I really need to do that tomorrow. I can put that in as a task. And then I know that I've marked it somewhere so that I can come back to it, and then I can actually just, breathe and have my evening and move on. So you can kind of use that. Okay. You can then sort of see what's happening the next day. Okay. If that needs to be, sort of RSVP'd, you can do. And then you can use your reflect on your emotions at the end of the day. Okay. And then you can close out your day with guided meditation. Okay, so you actually have kind of this headspace meditation that you can then actually kind of take forward. Now, if I just close the virtual commute down with the headspace, just go back into Viva Insights there. There we go. Just make this a bit bigger. If I go into the headspace, we've got different mindfulness exercises that are contained within there. So different things to do with kind of like developing, sort of if you're in a really particularly negative space, you can go and kind of actually spend some time with, sort of a mindfulness exercise that will help you to kind of perhaps refocus how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and so on. Okay, so there's a whole range of different options there, different focus music and that kind of thing. So if you are trying to concentrate, it gives you kind of some different options there. Okay, so that sits within Teams, just under the three dots there. You can add Viva Insights to your Teams kind of environment. And again, as I say, that's personal to you. Okay. So that's thinking about kind of social emotional wellbeing for students and staff using things like reflections. Just while we're in Teams, I just wanted to also point out whether it's a staff praise or student praise, one of the key benefits that we've got with using kind of the posts area here is the ability to give praise to students, to teachers, to whoever. Who doesn't love a gold star? Okay, who doesn't love kind of a gold badge? And so if I click on the praise app here, if we are thinking about fostering well-being, sort of recognizing when people do well, whether it's our learners when they're sort of working well in a group, or whether they've completed a really good piece of work, or they've supported others, whatever the badges that they sort of have access to here, we can then sort of celebrate their responses. Now, the good thing for that is that's now very trackable. So you can actually kind of see the history of different praise that you've given, different praise that students have received, and so on. But it also means that, sort of we're able to recognise people at that time. And that can be really powerful for staff as well. Just being able to say, thanks, you've helped me out today, or I really value kind of the support that you've given, or, sort of whatever it is that you want to kind of put in place here. You have a way to do that kind of either publicly. So I'm using the posts area of a team here, but actually you could just send some praise to somebody directly in chat. Now that does require chat to be turned on for staff to staff or students, and quite often, you might find that chat is turned off for students, but it might all be turned off between staff and students. So it can be within the Teams environment, but it can be in that chat if that's turned on. Okay, so let's go back into the Praise app here. Okay, so if I wanted to say that student is a problem solver, so let's choose either here. Okay, let's stay solving your problems. There we go. Okay, and we can just send that straight over. So effectively that's going to recognize the student or staff, whoever you're setting that for. Okay, it's going to give them a notification in their activity. We can view our praise history. Okay, again, look at where we're going back to Viva Insights. Okay, we can look at our praise history, and we can look at, if we go back here, we can see kind of, sort of what we've received, and then we can also look at what we've sent, okay, to other people as well. And then we can go to that message if we wanted to. But it means that we can actually chart kind of not just the praise that we receive, but also what we've sent out to other people. Okay, so moving on from praise, I want us to think about kind of the way that students look at activities and outcomes, and actually how we can use a tool called Flipgrid to be able to, sort of focus on their student voice effectively. Okay, so I can go over to Flipgrid here. Okay, if you haven't come across Flipgrid before, it effectively is a tool that we can use, that we can use our Office 365 to log into. It's part of the Microsoft family of tools. Okay, and effectively we can set up classroom environments for students to be able to respond to tasks. And we can also use the camera option there to record videos as well. So if we wanted to record, say, thinking about wellbeing, thinking about assemblies that you might be delivering on wellbeing, we could actually pre-record kind of using the camera, or we can utilize kind of the different topics here. So I've got kind of different class groups here. Perhaps if I pick up this one on diversity, okay, what I would be able to do is effectively add a topic here. And it could actually be just a topic along the lines of, sort of, how do you feel about the exams? Okay. On your description here, you can say record a video. Put that in to share your feelings. Okay, you probably put some more detail there. Okay, but effectively you can kind of put in a description. You can add topic media, so you can record your own video. Okay, so perhaps you could share how you're feeling, or how you think, sort of students could be feeling, and that kind of thing. But effectively you can add different sort of resources, YouTube videos, links to different things. You can decide how long they can record for. So if it's a recording where they're sharing their feelings, maybe you want to give them a tiny bit longer to do that. So maybe not just a minute, but I'm going to give them 2 minutes. You can decide kind of how long that is. So, I mean, if this is a learning sort of context that you want to be able to use this for in terms of like a learning outcome, You can actually make that kind of short piece or a longer piece anywhere up to 10 minutes. Okay, so you can choose kind of how long that is. So let's make this one 2 minutes. Okay, if I go to the top here, I do also have the settings. So thinking about this, you can moderate the videos. Okay, so I actually have it set my default. You'll notice that you can change your settings and then save them as the default settings. So at some point historically, I've changed my default settings to moderate videos and comments. The likelihood is that's going to be turned off if you're using this for the first time. So it'll look more like this, in which case you can go and turn that on. And that means that that's going to protect the videos from other students seeing each other's. So we can start to think about kind of where how students are feeling. They're responding directly to you, but you don't have to make that public out to the group. Okay, so because this topic is sitting in my group here, this one's called diversity discussion, but it could be that actually your group is your year 6 class or your year 10 class, or whatever it is. Effectively, you don't necessarily want those quite personal reflections to necessarily be public unless the student agrees to have that shared. So there's a kind of a circle of trust there, for that to not be kind of public to the rest of the class. If you leave that unchecked, basically when they go back to the topic, they can see a list of all the tasks, all of the responses, and they can actually go and watch them. Now that could be really good if in advance of setting the topic, you've actually said, you know what, I'm going to leave this open, I'm not going to moderate it, and we can actually kind of listen to each other's ideas around something. It just depends on the level of the topic as to, whether you want to moderate it or not, but you have that control as the teacher. You can decide when it starts and ends. Okay, so you can decide kind of when it launches and when you want to close the doors effectively. You can add closed captions. So when we start to think about kind of the well-being of students with learning needs potentially, having closed captions available on different things. If you think accessibility, that can be really useful as well. And we can decide whether students can leave comments on things. Okay, so you can actually just say then none if you want to, or you can leave it there. Now, you do have different settings. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can do things like turn on likes for videos. I tend to find that can quite often generate, depends on kind of the maturity of the students, that can quite often generate, how many likes have you got? How many likes have you got? But if we actually use likes as a way of, have a listen to the different things. And if we're looking at people's opinions and thinking about that student voice, add a like to the ones that you agree with or the ones that you'd like to hear more about. You can set the likes as part of the routines of the learning experience with the students. So it's really up to you kind of how you do that, but you can turn that on and off. You can decide kind of what they have access to. So do they have access to lenses and filters and backdrops and so on? So if they spend so much time kind of, sort of putting things like backdrops on, they don't end up actually recording anything. You can turn that off so that they just focus on kind of the content they're actually recording. Okay, so once I'm happy, so I've got my details in place and I've checked my settings, I can then post the topic. Okay, and we can click on all set. And then for the students, if we just go into the member view here, for the students, they can then see, their response, they can go in and add a response if they want to. Okay, this is going to clash because I'm currently on there we go, it's working. So effectively we can have that. We can put in a backdrop if we wanted to. Okay, so let's put one on there. Okay. Give that a second to load up. There we go. There we go. And we can then, use things like a whiteboard if you wanted to. We can, bring in different things. We can record our screen. We can put different filters on. We can put our video in different places. So we can have that, over here or over there. We can make us much smaller if we wanted to. You can have kind of the control about what you do in terms of the video. But it does mean that we've got the ability to give students a space where they can actually, sort of respond in a way that's perhaps different than just their standard kind of part of the classroom. And it does mean those students who are less likely to respond, perhaps those ones who are nervous about speaking in front of other students, or who are reticent to speak in front of other students. Perhaps we've got, sort of the ones who will sit and say absolutely nothing. Okay. Effectively, what I can do here is I can give them a space, okay, with which to share their responses, and again, creating that kind of sense of trust where, so it doesn't necessarily have to be public to the rest of the class. It can just be them sharing their learning. If I think back to, I had a student who really struggled with speaking listening. So I had a lovely, sort of girl who was trying to do her GCSE exams, had to do a speaking listening assessment, and trying to get her to actually say anything was really, really difficult. And so much so that actually I think she ended up kind of getting a lower grade because she couldn't actually kind of engage in that. And we tried so many different ways. And I would have loved to have had, this wasn't available at that time, it was quite a while ago, but I would have loved to have had a tool like Flipgrid at that time to give that student a different way to kind of sort of practice that speaking listening kind of assessment without having to do that necessarily kind of within the school context. And then she would potentially be able to come back in and do that live with me in a sort of better way. So for her, that would have given her sort of a better access to her learning outcomes, kind of being sort of a different function. And the key thing for us as teachers is that we can give the students different ways to approach understanding how they feel, but also being able to give them that voice in place. When we start to think about things like Minecraft as well, sort of we have different access to resources within Minecraft to be able to look at social and emotional learning. So if I just bring this over here, just go grab a link for you. Okay, there we go. So there is a whole kit for social and emotional learning, okay, that students can use for Minecraft. So if you've got Minecraft licensed within your environment, okay, and if you haven't, it's worth kind of investigating kind of the Minecraft Education edition. So let me just bring this over onto the screen here. Okay. Fantastic. So there's actually a whole series of different resources within. So we're in education.minecraft.net, and I'll put this into the Wakelet as well for us to be able to use towards the end of the session. But effectively, you can look at a whole range of different worlds that support social and emotional learning. Okay, so it's thinking about, sort of them being able to reflect on their feelings, but also thinking about key areas like making responsible decisions, understanding the feelings of others, being empathetic, sort of. So there's cultural considerations within here as well, actually understanding and learning different cultures as well, which can be part of that kind of social and emotional learning piece. Okay, so if we go down to the featured resources here, we have a whole empathy village, okay, where students can encourage caring with their classmates. Okay, so that's set to be usable right the way across sort of quite a number of age groups there, but it certainly kind of is potentially very useful. The one that is actually sort of quite well recommended is this one here, the Mindful Night. Okay, so if I just open this one up, so you get kind of the learning objectives, the guiding ideas. Okay, so this is kind of getting them to look at how they regulate their emotions, how they behave, and their in different contexts with other people. The idea of self-awareness. We talked about that, sort of being aware of our own emotions, and so being able to name those emotions. Quite often for students, if we think about this, quite often for students who are struggling to be able to identify how they're feeling about things, who are struggling to find a way to talk about that, by giving them a different aspect. So by giving them, even just giving them Minecraft here, it's something so far removed from the way we would normally have those conversations or ask students to reflect on how they're thinking, how they're feeling, that it could actually potentially be really useful for unlocking, sort of a space for students to be able to talk. Much like we were talking about with flipgrid, giving them a different space to be able to talk through how they're feeling, or even just be able to kind of explore through sort of that experience-based learning different ways, sort of, and how then apply those to kind of real world contexts. The great thing here is if you are using Minecraft, or if you're thinking about using Minecraft, is all of these resources have been created for you. So you can, as long as you've got the licensing to use Minecraft Education Edition within your school or your organisation, you have a whole range of resources. You have the world that's been built for you. You can share and assign that to other people. You can open this directly into Minecraft from here. You've got lesson objectives, the guiding ideas, different student activities and teacher preparation notes. So there's a whole real kind of sense of resource base here that we can use kind of pretty much straight away. So we have kind of all of that available to us. Again, if we've got Minecraft kind of available in our licensing. So think about some different other ones there. So you have kind of, let me load up some more. Some things around digital citizenship. Again, thinking about kind of emotional well-being and general well-being. There's a real kind of idea about digital well-being, sort of thinking about sort of how students behave in the digital world and how they exist within the digital world, actually looking after their well-being there too. So thinking about that kind of sort of things like Safer Internet Day and so on, being able to use Minecraft to be able to explore those ideas, sort of is something that's worth kind of bringing back to your school or your organisation, if it's something that's possible for you. So again, lots and lots of different kits here available to you, but you can start to think about kind of how that might fit in with your curriculum. So, I find a lot of people talk about Minecraft and they think about kind of Minecraft clubs and that sort of side of things. When we are looking at building Minecraft into education, we need to actually start thinking about how that applies across learning sort of for all students. So clubs kind of generally tend to be populated with students who are already quite, sort of engaged in the Minecraft conversation, but actually we can use it as a way of engaging all students across the learning path. And there are lots and lots of resources available to do that. And I'll make sure all of these are available within the Wakelet after the session. Something to point out is that we have run a whole kind of webinar on using Minecraft in a social and emotional learning context. That will be launched as a YouTube link that you can view again. I will sort of make that available within the Wakelet as soon as that's been uploaded. So that was delivered quite recently, so that will be available soon. So just thinking then, so just to sum up, using Teams will give us a bedrock to be able to, if we just go back into the Teams kind of environment now, let's head back over to Office. So Teams will give us that bedrock of things like the Reflect app. We've also got a whole range of tools that can be used from a wellbeing point of view, in terms of Viva Insights that we've talked about. We've talked about, praise, being able to use different tools in different contexts. The one thing we didn't look at, we'll just have a quick look at now, is actually how we use forms. So you can actually use forms to create those reflections and those check-ins, and particularly if you've got any older students where they, perhaps they might feel like the emotions monster's perhaps a little bit babyish, or perhaps you want a more detailed reflection from students. It won't necessarily tie into the insights, so that's kind of something to be aware of. But when you create in a team, so if I just open the Teams kind of option here, under the plus button, you have the ability to add a tab for forms. So you may well have used that to put in a quiz or put in a survey of some form. Excuse the pun. Let's let that load up. Okay. What we can do is create a recurring survey. So quite often people kind of focus on here, they add an existing form, they go in and they grab kind of a, sort of a quiz or a form that they want to share with students. But if I click on create a recurring survey, I can actually choose employee wellbeing measurement, student wellbeing, daily health check-in. So if we choose the student one, okay, go to the next step, we can then customize, okay, our questions in the forms, okay, and we can see kind of there's a whole range of different questions that are related there that we can also put in place, okay. So you can go and customize those. You'd have to go out to Microsoft Forms to do it, but once you've kind of set this up, you can then just go into Forms and adjust those questions as you need to, okay. You can then set that up as a recurrence. That's using Power Automate, okay, to create a frequency for those forms, okay. So you can literally set up that within here, select the Teams channel, pop the survey link into a message if you want, okay, but you can set that up as a recurring survey using those steps. So then you decide in checking the results, you can see the real-time responses in Forms. We know that if you're using Microsoft Forms, you have the option to, sort of look at the responses, or you can click on the Excel spreadsheet and you can actually get some deeper analytics there. You can start filtering responses and so on. Okay, so I click Save. Okay, and now I have my student check-in for students to be able to fill out, and I'm going to get that back in my if I go into my forms here, okay, just let that load up, I can get that data come back into Microsoft Forms. Okay, there we go. Okay, so just come out of the Coastal Land Forms one, and we can see that student check-in sits there. Okay, we can then go and customize that if we want to, but we can then see the responses appearing there as well. So that can be a one-off, or that can be a regular survey. That can be for staff, it can be for students, it can be for health, it can be for well-being. The whole idea is that the different tools that we have available to us, we can employ in the way that suits us. Okay, so moving forward, then we always provide a wait clip with our sessions. Okay, so if I just move that on a second. Okay, oh, not too far. There we go. So you're more than welcome to scan in that QR code. I'll also post a comment with the link to the wait clip, okay, which I'm just doing now. There we go. Any resources that are useful for this session will be posted into that wait clip. So there'll be some follow-up resources in there around Reflect, around Viva Insights, around Minecraft and so on. And as we say, there's plenty of different ways that this is being used, but it's always being constantly developed. I think the thing to end on here is that this isn't a thing that's been done by Microsoft. It's a constant kind of update. So there's always different ways they're looking to provide support for students and for staff in, sort of looking at their emotional well-being. It is a key priority across the Microsoft product suite to actually kind of give us the tools that we need to use to be able to help our students. So I hope that's been useful for everybody. Please do pop into the chat if you've got any particular questions, and we hopefully will see you next week, okay, where we'll be looking at another kind of form of enabling equitable education and accessing learning. Okay, well, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon.